I was reading an article. CBS Sports Chicago put out 4 reasons to be optimistic for the Chicago Bears this coming season, and one of the big statements they made is the offensive line isn't that bad. So today I just kind of want to talk about, is the Chicago Bears offensive line really that bad? I know they performed very poorly last year, right? And it really has altered our perspective, because in 2018 they actually performed pretty well. And really the only difference is, Kyle Long. That's the one player we're missing. And in 2019, Kyle Long really didn't play that well. And hey, even in 2018, when we were missing Kyle Long for a little bit, we still played pretty well. We didn't play awful, right? So the article also kind of pointed out, they said that we have a quality duo in Massie and Leno at tackle. James Daniels has played well when he was young, has played well when he is young at guard, right? And Whitehair is a borderline All-Pro, right? And I think that Whitehair is by far our best offensive lineman that is set in stone, Pro Bowler, borderline All-Pro, really, really good player. Massie, Leno, they're a little bit underrated, I think, because both of them had an okay year last year, but not a great year. And then James Daniels, I think when we had him at center, performed pretty poorly, but when he went back to guard, he performed really well again. So ultimately, we also had some major injuries. We had players coming out and in, and pretty much my take on this is that I think we do kind of underrate our offensive line. And we do need to address certain positions. Obviously, I think the right guard position needs to be addressed better than it is currently. Even though I do have faith in Ifedi, until I see him in a game situation where he's performing at a high level, I cannot give him, my absolute 100% faith and like that. But the interior of the line, with the exception of Ifedi, is pretty damn good. And then again, Massie, Leno, they're pretty good. They're not bad. They're not the way a lot of Bears fans make them out to be. Okay. And I think the one thing I wanted to hit on with this segment is just, when you have injuries at the offensive line, offensive lines can go downhill like this really, really quickly, right? They can completely lose everything they have going for it, because a lot of it is it's a cumulative effort. If one offensive lineman isn't holding up his share, then it ruins it for the rest of the offensive linemen. Because, hey, if your right guard is getting blown past, especially right guard, because, hey, right guard, it has one of the quickest, from the time of snap to the quarterback, it's one of the quickest ways to get through the offensive line, right? And you see Aaron Donald do it. He has really, really high, really, really quick time to the quarterback, solely because of the position he plays. It takes a lot more time to go around the edge, right? And when you have a player like a right guard who just lets a player blow past him, then the right tackle automatically has to adjust and try to get that player too, which then leaves him vulnerable because he has 2 players on him, and it's just a compounding effort. And when you don't have that unit as a whole, offensive line is so much more about having good, or at least moderate quality players at every single position, than it is having stars and scrubs, right? It's so much more about an entire unit than it is about one player.
Yeah, and I think what you just said speaks to the fact that I think the major key for the Bears offensive line moving forward this season, of course, is some better guidance under Juan Castillo, but it's also building that chemistry, not moving around a lot of players around the line, and staying healthy. If they're able to keep a lot of the same players at the same position, stop moving around Daniels and Whitehair, keep Whitehair at center where he's best, and keep Daniels at left guard where he's best, and trying to work Ifedi in, and then keeping that kind of chemistry up is going to be the key. That's the best way for over the duration of the season to get the best kind of line play. And with that quality that they have, throughout the entirety of the offensive line, especially through the interior, they'll be able to do very well, even with not adding in that many huge pieces to that offensive line, just by building that chemistry and staying rigid and keeping that integrity to position. I think those are the biggest keys. And like you said, it's not about having a star and a scrub. I mean, They're stars and scrubs. I mean, we've seen that before with the Bears offensive line, especially in like Kyle Long's early years. I mean, Kyle Long stood out, but everyone else on the offensive line blew. And then, fortunately, they were able to build around him a bit more, and we had a couple of really good offensive lines for a while. And then, injuries, happen, and that's something that can really deplete an offensive line fast. I mean, it's important to have depth, but, once you start getting a lot of injuries along the offensive line, plugging people in, they need to build up that chemistry. Right, they need to work as a unit. I mean, having good individual players is good, but, learning to work together as a unit as a O-line is the biggest and the most important part. And the Bears have a chance. They have the pieces to have a very good offensive line. It's just a matter of keeping that integrity.
Yeah, and ultimately, if we can get, just average play from Germaine Ifedi, which I think we could actually potentially get high quality play from him. He's got that many good traits to him as a player. He's still working on, the more technical side, but hey, guard is a much less technical position than left tackle, right tackle. So moving him to a position that may better fit him and what he played more in college, I think we're going to see a better Germaine Ifedi. Can he be average? Can he be above average? If that happens, this offensive line can be really good. Like, this offensive line could be top 15, top 10 potentially, if he performs well, just like it was in 2018, where, hell, Kyle Long didn't play that well in 2018. He played average. He still had injuries. We had some rotation there. But all the other players, they had the right type of consistency where and not only consistency, but just like faith in each other and ability to really understand the way each other plays. And that led them to being a top 10 offensive line statistically. Now, I don't know if Germaine Ifedi will offer us that level of consistency, but if he does, this line could be pretty good. This line doesn't need to be that bad. And it's not out of the question that he does that, because, hell, one of the biggest busts, Eric Flowers, he jumped around from team to team to team, and finally when he got to the Redskins, something clicked and he stuck. Okay, something clicked and he stuck. And ultimately, yes, I would like to see us upgrade at this position, bring in another more well-known name, just as from a safety standard, put them against each other. But really, at the end of the day, it's just if we can get that consistency there, this isn't a bad line.
No, it isn't. And right, the pieces are there. It just needs to gel and fit together. And it is almost as a good thing that that Ifedi is coming in with a new offensive line coach, because the schemes are as new to everyone as it is to him. So they're almost all learning together, and so much of it is about trust. When you're trusting the linemen around you, you're not second guessing, and you can focus on your own task at hand. Like you said, with the whole tackle and guard situation, when the right tackle doesn't have to worry about the right guard and he can focus on the edge rusher, just everything starts to work so seamlessly. So if the Bears offensive line can really start to build that trust and chemistry, it's gonna be perfect for them. And it's not something that's over their heads. It's something that can be done. It's just a matter of doing it, though. It's easy to talk about it and say, yes, the Bears have the pieces and they can do it. They do need to improve from last season. That is 100% true, and we need to see it happen. And I really hope it can, and I do think it can happen. It's just we actually need to see it. Very much like what we talked about with the quarterback position with Trubisky. Seeing is believing.
Yeah, and one last thing before we move on to our final topic. I'm really excited to see the new way the Chicago Bears run game develops this year, because from my understanding, the reason why Helfrich and who was our offensive line coach or offensive line coach? Highstand, Harry Highstand. Who was a pretty good offensive line coach. He's really well respected. He got accredited for like Quentin Nelson's development. But anyways, I'm really excited to see how the run game looks this year, because from my understanding, the reason why both of those two coaches got fired was because they were put in charge of the run game. It was their duty this entire year to work together to come up with a good run scheme that worked out. And they didn't do it. The run game was actually pretty awful this year. So now we have Bill Lazor, who notably took Joe Mixon over 1,000 yards in his rookie and second year. And then we also have Juan Castillo, who worked with the Buffalo Bills for a long time. You had Shady McCoy over there. and some decent running backs as well. Never really a shortage at run game there. So I'm really interested to see if these two coaching hires impact the way David Montgomery performs next year.
Yeah, we can only hope. And with those players and those names that you tossed around there, it does seem very promising. I think a lot of Bears fans, have kind of agreed with us and have been right there with us and saying that, yeah, Montgomery is going to break out. It seems like in the comments section of YouTube and all that. That's where we kind of see the most agreeance. And I think that
video about that coming up today.
Yeah, and I think that it's just because there's so many traits about Montgomery that really stand out and look like he could have a breakout season, that he could really be a top running back in this league. And it just is about getting that kind of run scheme set up and something that he's comfortable with. So with two, with an offensive line coach and a coordinator that can really, work to build that together, it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out, because it could be a massive, massive step up from what we saw last year.
Hey guys, like our video, subscribe, and check out our bi-weekly podcast on Apple Podcasts. Thanks.